I'm Mary Davidson, and it's our community. I am always so pleased to have such interesting people for you to meet, and today is a particularly interesting person, and he is a guest in our community, and his name is Nari Ward. The Nerman Gallery is hosting Nari Ward's very first one-man museum exhibition in the United States. It's called Represents, and it shows in the Nerman Museum between June the 4th and August the 29th. He's been the recipient of many awards, accolades, and much attention. Welcome, Nari.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Nari is from, and I have to ask you, how did you get to Hunter College from St. Andrews, Jamaica?
Yeah, well, the family moved from Jamaica when I was quite young. I was 12 years old, and we moved to the United States for a better life. And I actually went to School of Visual Arts initially and kind of ran out of money.
Well, that does happen.
Very expensive school. And just by chance, I got a job that left me at the same subway stop, 68th Street at Hunter College in Manhattan, and decided, well, you know, this job's part-time. I have the rest of the day, let me take some classes. And I end up meeting a mentor, this woman, wonderful friend of mine, Emily Mason, and she basically saw that I had some skills and really supported me in doing the visual arts.
When you started in the visual arts, now the folks are going to see in a minute that your art is not exactly representational. So it's representational, but you have to think about it. Right. When you first started, did you do figures and dogs and cats and flowers?
Oh yes, yeah. No, in fact, my traditional training, I did, figure drawing and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. In fact, in my grad program, what I did mostly was drawing and more kind of formal, abstract drawing. But I would always use things that were a little bit unorthodox, like fire, things that I couldn't control entirely, that there was some element of chance within that body of work, and some of that sort of seeps into the work that I do now.
Don't you think that even at that point you were reflecting what you saw as life in the world around you? We can't always control it, and there is a lot of element of chance. And I mean, when you open your eyes in the morning.
Yeah, no, and it's true, and I think it was also about how to access that, how to mine your those things that you're not able to really understand, and figure out how to put them into some kind of language.
Do you think that takes maturity?
It's a process, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's definitely things that I'm doing now that I'm much more secure about being able to take on because of just the experience of having.
I'm not sure you could have pulled them off at 19.
No, I definitely couldn't.
No, really.
Yeah, no. I teach in I actually teach at Hunter now, and I'm a full professor there. And I always part of one of my biggest frustration a lot of times with my students is they'll have all the facility and be incredibly talented and have what it takes to be an artist, but they don't have life experience. They don't have anything they need to say. And I think that's a really important thing, to have that passion to want to talk about something and to have something unique that you want to communicate.
Well, and life experiences, I think, make you multidimensional.
Right. Yeah,
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
True.
In your art now, you are what some of your commentators have called a modern archaeologist.
Right.
And you often reclaim discarded objects and mold those objects from your urban archaeology into a piece of art. Now, your art is unique because it always makes a statement of some sort. One of your better finds was an old sign from a liquor store.
Right.
And it's called?
Well, there's a project called, it's actually an entire project where I think it's perfectly stated what you said about modern archaeology and urban archaeology, because what I was intrigued with is I was looking for that particular body of work. I was inspired by memorials, street memorials, that somebody who passed away and their loved ones would put out flowers and a picture and notes, and they'd also do almost and always there'd be some evidence of alcohol And in a lot of cultures, alcohol is this rite of passage. It's this element that people use to mark the moment and to bring the community together. So I got intrigued with how to use alcohol in a way that would address this memorial component. And I realized that within the word liquors is the word soul. So I did this particular piece, and they've become a series of works, so that I've actually found different signs that are abandoned signs on buildings that even the landlord is not aware they're there, because they stay up after the liquor store is closed. They stay up for years, and people they become invisible.
But they're always liquor store signs.
They're always liquor store signs, because I wanted to.
And the word is always soul.
And it's always soul, except that it actually changes. Like this is called a Radha liquor store. The one that there's actually two in the show. There's the real liquor store and Radha. And the title comes from the store that's actually there now. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, when I took away the sign, I'd say, okay, what store is there now in that particular store? It was called Radha Grocery. So it became Radha Liquor Store. So it is this kind of urban archaeology sort of marking this, this space.
Why is it always urban?
I like this, it's the intensity of urban space. For me, in terms of collecting things, there's a lot more happenstance that I'm more inclined to find within a kind of urban environment, rather than I've gone to, I'm become a kind of aficionado now, a professional at junkyards, because even when I go to Europe, the first place I go,
they see you coming.
I just go there to do research. I like to see how different cultures deal with their trash.
Well, I moved to ask you if junkyards are different.
Oh, they're very different, and,
really?
And oh yeah, and I've gone to Japan, I've gone to Geneva. All interestingly enough, just a quick story. I went to Geneva, and I was working for the United Nations on a project. They commissioned me. So I went there and I saw this material that I want, these electronic parts. And I figured, United Nations, no problem, let's go and get the stuff. We can get a pile of it and I can work with it. We went to the head of the sanitation, and he was like, no, I will not give anything, because I have been entrusted to discard these things, and they must be discarded. And this is the mindset. So it was just really strange, And then you go to other places, and they're like, "Oh yes, please take them. Please take them."
That's the first time you've ever been turned down.
And with the United Nations of all people backing you, so it was a very interesting experience.
But you've been green since the early '90s.
Exactly. I didn't have to wait for an economic downturn to go green.
You were ahead of your time.
Definitely.
Now, your work always has a subtext. I mean, you see the item, and they're large, and you look at it and you think, what? But it always has a subtext, and the subtext usually runs either to authority or responsibility.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's.
What?
I never really want the work to be about a kind of formal exercise of transformation. It has to have a passion, and what drives that passion is my interest in a question, a critique of what's going on, or maybe some doubt or frustration with some kind of system that I see, and it's a way to have a dialogue with that critique. For myself, it starts out, but then I hope to have it open-ended enough for the viewer to also get involved in that discussion.
But that makes us partners.
Right, right.
Well, but and I also noticed when I looked at the show, it's not in the past or in the future. Usually, it's in the now.
Right. Yeah, that's a great observation. I feel like that's. I always call this kind of, I said, this affecting presence of the moment. I think that's the key thing, is that I really want it to be about the moment as much as possible. And all of this physicality that I'm bringing to the work, from the cut shoe tips to the flowers to, the lights that's illuminating the sign, they're all about the clearing that moment for the viewer, and get them in that moment with the work. And in being in that moment, they internalize something. They maybe even go inside their own head and figure out what this thing could reference for them and their own experience.
But I would submit to you that even though your work is in the now, as people internalize it, then it makes it viable and for the future.
Yeah, yeah.
If the subject that you're trying to articulate gets across, then you're able perhaps to change the future.
Yeah, and in a lot of, that's a great point, because in a lot of one of my strategies of success is that if you leave this show and you see a liquor store sign or a Chase Bank sign. There's some Chase Bank banners in there. If you're able to then look at that, go back into the world and see a Chase sign, for instance, and think about the piece that you saw in the gallery, your interpretation of that sign is going to change. So in effect, I've adjusted your position on something that you wouldn't normally have thought about. You know, I really like that idea that the work can possibly conjure that moment for the viewer.
Are you optimistic about the future of the urban centers in this country and in the world?
I think yes, I am. I think I'm optimistic about people. I think we have this incredible ability to overcome, and so I you know, in all my work, even this strategy of using discards in trying to find their vulnerability, but their sort of hopefulness. There is this notion that transformation is possible no matter what.
Well, I think that is extremely important, because if people see, if they do not see hope and optimism in your work, then it's a little bit more difficult to move them to make some changes in what they in the surroundings.
Yeah, that's really for me that's really important.
Very important.
You know.
It is said about your work that juxtapositions are often ambiguous, your juxtapositions, however, allowing for multiple open-ended interpretations. I want you to pull that thread out just one more time, because I think that's important.
Yeah, you know, the reason why it's always hard to talk about the work is that I don't want it to be about my interpretation. My interpretation is what gets me to make the work, and it is the passion, and it is the like I said, that kind of question of like almost like the sort of soil for the pearl to develop. But I never want it to be the manual. You know, I really want that it's like a buffet for somebody to come in and get involved in things that they respond to, and that can then take their own experience somewhere else.
Do you ever talk to anybody that looks at your things that sees something that you never saw?
Always, and that's always a great. That for me, that's one of the better things. That's even more surprising and more interesting for me when somebody has something that I say, well, I never thought of that. That's interesting. You know, they've connected with something that I would never perceive.
That's what it's all about.
That's exactly.
That is. Yeah. Then you have succeeded.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
Your comments tend to encompass things like immigration and religion and sex and patriotism, all of the things that are, as they say, hot topics today, and things that aren't always going as well as they might, things that create, that cause the pot to bubble, if you will.
Contention. Right.
Yes, yes. And so in making your comments, you use oil drums, and people will see all these things as they come to the Nerman Gallery to see the show. Oil drums and tar slabs and discarded doors and dried salted codfish. You even did that.
Right.
It was a good thing they were dried and salted.
That's the smell.
That's right. Old television sets. Now, how do you look at all these things and you pick up things from all over?
Right.
How do you correlate the thing with the comment, the social comment that you want to make? How does that?
Yeah, I think that's where that idea that I have in my head, trying to find a form that can echo that idea is, you know, it's that middle ground that one can never really pin down. You know, it's a lot of this element of faith. You know, this is a strange word to bring in the conversation that you're talking about, because in fact, a lot of times I'm not sure what I'm going to pick up, you know, or what, like we were talking earlier, and I said, yeah, I have a storage space that's, you know, the entire length of my house, because I need to just collect things. And I'll find something and I'll say, you know, this thing reminds me of something, or this probably could be about X, Y, and Z. But I'm never quite sure when it's going to take its momentum, me on that journey. Do
you get a thought in your head? In other words, you read something, you talk to somebody, you see something that you want to comment on.
Yeah. For instance, it's better to talk the practical things.
Please.
Like for Airplane Tears, it's a piece that's in the show, and it was.
And it's the one with the backs of the TVs.
It's just the backs of TVs. It's about over, you know, close to 200 the TV backs. It took me about 3 months to collect them, And I would be driving on, and it became a game with my children because they'd be in the car, my son and daughter, young kids, and I'd tell them, if you see any TVs, let me know. And they'd say, Dad, we saw one. And I would drive and go and grab it, and they'd time how long it took me to take it off. I had it down to 15 seconds. I could skin the back of a TV. We call it skinning TVs.
Well, that's a new talent.
So, yeah, it was fun. So, but anyway, I realized it became an obsession first. That's how it sort of starts with an obsession. I realized that I wanted to talk about media in a way that dealt with its power over the individual. But at the same time, I also was interested in televisions as a phenomenon, in that a lot of times people look at TVs and they never notice what's behind it. And I guess it also came at a time when, you know, the flat screen TV was making its entry, and I realized that this
planned obsolescence
it was
overcome us.
It was coming. That
Yeah,
these,
yeah.
In fact, maybe my kids or the generation maybe their kids would never even know what the back of a TV set looked like or care to think about it. And I'm always interested in those spaces that nobody cares to look at, or they look at it so much they don't see it anymore. And I feel like that's a really pregnant space for meaning to be enveloped.
In this work, the handkerchiefs, the white handkerchiefs, I mean, they just come out and grab you. Why the handkerchiefs?
It was really a gesture. You know, it was like this thing was becoming so formal when I was doing it. I wanted to put into it a kind of gesture. So each television has a sort of handkerchief laid over the back end, and basically it was a way to bring in this element of empathy. You know, it's this crying, it's all of this reference to the title evokes, but it brought about a sort of, it was this epic kind of image, and it made it somehow more human as well.
I think that's interesting. I do. Why did you use a white handkerchief?
Because it's a formal. I'm an artist. After all, I'm still formalist. I still have to consider the formal things. And you know, when I had this thing up, and it's all this is great, and it was this powerful black mass, and I was like, okay, great, that's what I wanted, this overbearing presence. But now it's like, how can I pull that back a little bit, you know, and have it also operate on this other level? And so the handkerchief allowed for this. The white handkerchief allowed for that to happen.
Well, there is another piece in the show that I found just fascinating. It's huge. What is it, 10 feet high?
Oh, the Blacktop Man bootleg version?
Yeah.
It's probably closer to 14 feet in height.
I know it's big.
Yeah.
And it's made out of what, tar scraps?
It's actually, it wants to be made out of asphalt, but it's actually made out of foam and tire shreds.
And it's shaped like a snowman.
Right.
And it's black.
Right.
And embedded in it are?
It's all luxury bootleg material. There's Prada, there's Gucci, there's Coach.
The knockoffs.
Valentino.
Yeah.
All Rolex watches, all knockoffs that I went and purchased. You know, I purchased them in the marketplace. And basically, it was my critique of this desire for individuals to sort of realize success, this notion of success, through a kind of forgery, or through buying bootleg material. I got really intrigued with what that mindset is and how one could bring that into a conversation.
In other words, a Rolex is a Rolex, even if it's not a Rolex.
To the person, who's looking at it.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with quality. It has to do with
image.
Perception, right? Image. Right.
And one's image of oneself.
Right. So this entity, I'll call the Blacktop Man entity. The idea is that it really wants to be real. You know, it's even in what it's trying to be an asphalt snowman, but it's not. It's just foam and tire shreds, and on its belly is a TV set, a large projection, and that projection is the image is details of the surface of the Blacktop Man. So it's almost like you're looking at this. It's looking at itself. It's sort of internalizing itself. Juxtaposed, the details are movie trademarks coming in and out. Sony.
Do you think we don't look at ourselves enough?
I think we look at ourselves, but perhaps we look at them with the wrong lens.
But that's the point you're trying to make.
That's what I really wanted, and I didn't want people to say, "Oh, bootleg material is bad." There is a kind of there's a space it fills in people's lives, And that space is what's problematic, not the material desire.
Space filled in people's lives takes many forms.
Right.
And sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, and sometimes it should be worked on.
Right, right.
So perhaps the encouragement for people to look at themselves. You remember the poem, "O wad some power the gift to gie us to see ourselves as others see us. It would fry many a blunder free us and foolish notion." Have you ever heard that?
No, that's great.
Well, it's true. And so if we look at ourselves with a clearer lens.
I think and that's a really important thing to think about, how to look at ourselves, because the hardest thing is not necessarily to look at ourselves, but to find a distance to be able to internalize, to get that internal view, because so often people are so much in it that they can't pull themselves away to examine it. You know,
It's true.
And I feel like if the work can allow for a reflection like that, then that's a starting point.
As you put together these constructions, there really are constructions.
Oh yeah.
As you put them together, what's going through your mind? What are you thinking?
A lot of things, like, oh my God, is this thing going to work? That's probably the first thing. But you know, I listen. I try and listen to what the work needs. I think the
in other words, you can stand back from it a little.
Right,
bit. Yeah.
right, and I always try. Very rarely do I start out with a notion or an image of what I want and end up with that. Something else happens in the journey. The work tells me what needs to happen. Maybe it's even the limitation that forces me to have to adjust, and that changes the work into something else. So I think that's one of the. I'm a very hands-on artist. I can't have something fabricated, because for me to process the path of making the work is part of what the work needs to inform me of what's going to happen with it.
Well, but it's hard to fabricate recycled materials.
Right. I wish I could sometimes, because I'm envious of artists that can do that. They're like, get this stuff made and they'll do a drawing and say, okay, here. But and not that I'm not judging them. That's just works of their process. But no, I need to be in it, and it's definitely my anxieties and my.
Do you ever change as you're creating the construction? Do you ever change your mind about what you wanted to say to people?
Very rarely. I'm pretty stuck on what I wanted to say. It's just how do I need to say it?
How do you need to say it?
And that changes a lot, you know. And what material is able to evoke the questions that I want, and if it's not doing that, then I have to find another material that could do the same thing or do a similar inquiry. So all of those things are very fluid, almost to the very end for me.
You have another construct in the well, you have several, but one in particular. It's I don't know. It looks like a grocery card.
There's two. There's one called Savior, and there's one called Crusader.
Right, but there's color in them.
Right.
Now, the tar construct is black,
right.
and there's nothing bright on it.
But it is golden, because the surprise and accident that happened for me in that. Crusader, the one we're talking about, it's this winged plexiglass form and tied plastic bags, and it's connected to a shopping cart, and I go inside.
And it's big and tall.
And the wings are really, really very over my head, and I actually go inside it, but it's a vehicle, and there's a performance within the exhibition of that of me inside the vehicle, inside the contraption, let me say. But initially, I just wanted to kind of coat it with bitumen, tar, petroleum product. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do that, and that conceptually ties it to what questions I wanted to ask, because the piece gets pushed to...
Now, these are marginal people that you're talking about.
Well, it's I'm never really addressing marginal individuals as much as maybe people who don't have a voice, whose voices aren't really registered. So it's not an economic position as much as just a psychological sort of idea of that individual.
In other words, the silent majority should be there too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
so I actually was just going to coat it with this tar, and it'd be this funky. But then, interestingly enough, I didn't expect that the tar over this plastic when it dried, it turned golden. So it really started looking quite elegant, and I was like, okay, well, this is what it needs to do. And that's how the trophy ended up becoming the steering wheel, because once I had this golden trophy, a bronze trophy in my storage space, and I said, oh wow, this gold looks just like that gold that's in the, so.
And here you thought that was going to be there forever.
I thought it was going to be stuck in the basement. So I put that trophy together, and it became basically the apparatus for driving it. Yeah.
That's right. You also have, now color sometimes is important. You have sound and movement too in most, not so much movement of the piece, but within the piece,
right.
like there's sound or something like that.
Sound,
why do you do that?
Yes, sound is a really important. The work. I'm not afraid of embracing a kind of theatrical element, because if I can combine the theatrical and the physicality of materiality, within the work, then I feel like I have just more weapons. So, because one of the things about theater is the image. You're sitting in your seat, and then there's that image, and the light cues and the space sort of articulate what needs to happen in the narrative. And I'm interested in using that image, but also using also the material, because now in art installation you could actually go up to the thing and look at what it is and walk around it. So that physicality gets really important. So I feel like I can combine both things. So the sound is a leap into that theatrical space, and I try to use the sound especially sound very discreetly, because I know it can be overbearing and very powerful, and try to put it in the same level with the material somehow, and not have it overwhelm it.
But aren't you at the same time trying to stimulate the senses of the people that look at the piece?
Right. It's just another layer of bringing in their own experience, or a memory experience for them.
A partnership with them.
Right. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you through this sound, you think the experiences that they've had then play into that piece and the color, because something clicks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, anything that I can bring to senses. I've used sound. You talked about the codfish. I've used smell. Yeah. But it all makes sense. Like, codfish. I used that not because I wanted to be outrageous, outlandish. It was a reference to Jamaica, because codfish, ackee and saltfish, we call it saltfish, is the national dish, and it was also a reference to Christianity, because fish is a symbol of Christ. So it was a way of bringing all these points of interest in my work together.
Yeah, I find that absolutely fascinating, because in this construct that they're big but within that you still come back to the focus that you originally had.
Right. Yeah, I have to, because the choice is really key, and the choice has to make sense for me, and it has to. For me, it has to. There has to be a need for that thing to be there. Otherwise, I could just bring anything and have it look good next to whatever it is. But I need it to tell that story, and that's a really important part
You
of it.
have also concerned yourself recently with race, and most recently with those people with physical and mental handicaps. What brought you to the physical and mental handicaps? That's more of a person thing rather than a social comment.
Yeah, it's a funny part of growing up. I spoke about coming to Jamaica, from Jamaica, and one of my the job my mother had was to take care of this mentally handicapped older gentleman named Howie Kalmus. And because she worked, and I was sort of in the house, I would basically fix Howie's breakfast and gave him his lunch, and take care and manage to make sure he got what he needed. So I always had this real interest in working with individuals who seemed to be on this other plane, I would say,
Well, that's right.
and needed support. And
but you always come back to the neighborhood.
So yeah, that's
Howie and all this.
Oh yeah, that's the key, because that's it's always your life experiences that you figure out how to mine. And then I'm just trying to figure out how to mine those things. Then the older I get, the more I go back and say, oh, that's something that was relevant for me, and that could be relevant for a conversation that can happen in the future.
But the truth is, that's where things happen, in the neighborhood.
Right, right. Yeah.
And that's where changes occur, in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's true.
Within each person.
And you get it's a point of reflection. It's a point where it's a moment of stasis that you can look at all those changes and evaluate how things are evolving.
It is. It is. And I just think that you have, with your art, created a happy world, really, a hopeful world for you and your family and to live in, but also for the rest of us. You cause us to think. and otherwise it's no good.
That's what I need. That's what I hope that people can really take time to reflect. I think that's really important. We don't get it that enough, and I think media and all the things that we're exposed to now is about forcing us to a particular way to think. But people don't know how to think objectively about things, and they're actually afraid to really think.
They are, and I think that the soul and the conscience of the country, I believe, and of the world really, is often reflected through the soul and the eye of the artist.
Right.
I truly do.
Right.
And in this case, his name is Nari Ward, and through his art, he tries always to make the world a better place. Your constructs are pictures that speak 1,000 words, Nari.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mary. Pleasure.
And thank all of you. It's our community, and this is Mary Davidson. We'll see you again soon.